Good morning and welcome to our 7th annual Cuyahoga County Conference on Social Welfare. And our theme this year is what happens when everything changes. I'm Victoria Marion and I'm a member of the conference committee. Welcome everyone. I would like to first start off by thanking our conference sponsors, Case Western Reserve University, Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, Cleveland State University School of Social Work, the National Association of Social Workers, the Ohio chapter, the Center for Community Solutions, and Meredith Taylor Human Services System. Whew, boy. Those were all tongue twisters for me. And our co-sponsors, AHF Pharmacy, Asian Services in Action Incorporated, the Center for Community Solutions, Cleveland State NASW Student Club, Providence House, the University of Akron School of Social Work, the Lakewood campus, Ursuline College, woo-woo, and Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. So before we begin, we do have a welcome from the university and our sponsor, Grover Gilmore, Dean of the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Science from Case Western Reserve University.
Good morning, and welcome to the campus of Case Western Reserve University. I'm Cleve Gilmore, Dean of the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, and I'm so thrilled to welcome the Cuyahoga County Conference on Social Welfare to our home. I'm sorry I can't personally join you, but it's a great honor and joy to have you here today. And today, our work is more necessary and urgent than ever. The conference theme, What Happens When Everything Changes, was selected back in August, but it could not have been more prescient for the world we face today. As we collaborate and expand our knowledge at this conference, we must continue to ask, how do we lead in these uncertain times? How do we find solidarity? A topic I know your lunchtime speaker, Dr. Julian Earls, will address, and which is so timely. As I look at our school's history, we were founded more than 100 years ago to empower and care for the great waves of immigrants and refugees coming to Cleveland to escape poverty and persecution, eager to contribute to a community that embraced them. Our birthright is to work on behalf of all peoples and to fulfill our mission to build a more just world. At the Mandel School, we're finding strength in reaffirming our long-standing commitment to inclusion and non-discrimination, to the dignity and worth of all people, and to the values and ethics held dear by the social work and nonprofit professions. We believe we must speak out when we see those values threatened. We encourage others to join us in solidarity with the chorus that champions for social, racial, and economic justice. Vow with us to defend and advocate for the rights and human dignity of all, regardless of race, ethnicity, nativity, religion, gender identity, ability, or sexual orientation. May this conference and the solidarity of your colleagues provide you with the skills, knowledge, strength, and dare I say, hope for the days ahead. Have a great day.
Can't hurt to have a second good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Colleen Dempsey. I am the practice associate with the Ohio chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Welcome to our keynote panel today, In Solidarity, Mobilizing an Intersectional Resistance. Who's excited to be here? Me too. So NASW is thrilled to be taking part in this conference. We are your member, your association representing all of social work practice in Ohio and nationally. Who here is an NASW member? Excellent. Thank you very, very much. We can't do what we do. We can't participate in the activism that we participate in without membership. So thank you for all of you who are supporting that work, our work, my work. I'm here to moderate this panel today, and we're going to get to introducing, we will have 6 panelists up here. We're waiting to get to our 6th person. Hopefully he can make it. But I will get to introducing them in just a second. NASW, like many of you, could be interested in advocating for 1,000,001 different topics. Here we have a word bubble that attempts to encapsulate all of the answers that each of you gave as to what you're interested in advocating for, what rights issue you're interested in. Was it pretty hard to pick just one? Yeah. It is hard to pick just one. NASW feels that. Social workers are in so many different systems. We're working with so many different people. We have many different perspectives. And it's hard to pick just one thing to work on. So this year, as we are pivoting and attempting to hold on to the rights that we have gained as people, the rights that oppressed people have gained, and protect those rights, we've really come to understand and better embrace the term intersectionality. For whom is intersectionality a new term? Some of you, maybe? Basically, intersectionality is what happens when multiple forms of discrimination combine, overlap, and intersect. So just as it's difficult to pick just one issue that we're interested in, this comes from being complex people. Every person that we come into contact with can't be boiled down to just one thing. And intersectionality, the term, was coined by a law professor named Kimberly Crenshaw, actually in 1989, to discuss and better understand why our systems can't or have difficulty embracing the complexities of multiple layers of oppression, multiple layers of identity, and how they intersect. Social work systems are very similar. I'm not sure what that tone was. Social work systems are similar. We tend to, for ease of funding and for ease of kind of creating the boundaries of the work that we're going to do, consider one identity at a time. But building an intersectional resistance involves embracing, breaking open that singular point of view, and embracing the intersections of multiple identities. So today we're going to try to unpack that further and talk about what activism looks like when embracing an intersectional perspective. Professor Mike Dover of Cleveland State, welcome, put a lot of work into building a really in-depth definition of intersectionality. Merriam-Webster just doesn't always cut it for theories like this, right? So we made another word bubble with the words that came out and were highlighted through that definition. So I'd invite you to take a look at this. Today we're going to be trying to define and understand and experience solidarity. Solidarity within ourselves, with our multiple identities, solidarity with each other, and the ways that our identities overlap and the ways that we are different. And this is not an easy task either. When we are put in situations where we feel as though our funding is in competition with another very valid program's funding, when we're feeling like our groups, our people are divided more and more every day, it is not an easy task to find solidarity. So solidarity, unity of a group or class that produces or is based on a community of interests, objectives, and standards. Trying to find that middle ground. NASW feels that every person in this room has a place in this movement and that we can achieve solidarity with each other. Social workers are workers. Social workers are people. We bring all of ourselves to this profession, to working in health and human services, and we need to understand all of the limitations that we might feel, and then work to break through those limitations and dig deeper into this work, particularly at this time. Back in the 1960s and 70s, NASW National pivoted all of their work and dedicated full-time to this has now come to be called the civil rights movement. We believe that we're in a second civil rights movement now, second, third, millionth civil rights movement at this time, and are pivoting and deepening our work in that vein as well. So we'll get more into this later. There's a workshop that we can dig in and build depth into this conversation. But NASW really would encourage you to find your place in the movement. And hopefully this panel today can help spark some ideas if you're feeling a little out of energy. We understand that. So we're going to have a little bit about the format. We're going to give each panelist 5 minutes to speak, and we're going to be strict to that because we want to get to some time for questions, for audience questions, and then enhance the discussion with the panelists being able to answer and build answers off of each other. We're going to go in alphabetical order, and I will just introduce them by name. So we've given the panelists free rein to identify themselves in whichever capacity that they're here representing, whichever organization they're here representing, whatever identities they're here representing, and speak freely to that for 5 minutes. Panelists, you ready? Not ready. Got to be ready. All right. Let's see. Everyone, please welcome our first panelist that's going to speak. This is Ryan Clopton-Zimler, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so my name is Ryan Clopton-Zimler, and I am the Community Relations Manager for the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center of Greater Cleveland. I'm an MSAS alum, so I'm feeling it's a weird experience to be up here on the stage when I used to take classes right around the corner from here. I'm also a conference alum, a former intern for organizing, so shout out to all the folks that made this happen. Great work. So on and so forth. So the first question that I am charged to answer is the areas of human rights activism that I'm involved in and why it's important. And it's always a difficult question because we're here to talk about intersectionality. So how do I possibly identify one area of human rights activism that is important to me? So first and foremost, I think it's important that when we're talking about intersectionality as a whole, we have to name the fact that Kimberly Crenshaw was a law professor, but was also a Black woman. And for Black women, the movement around feminism and equity wasn't always inclusive of Black women. So her naming intersectionality as a Black woman was important. So I also want to put that out there. But when we're talking about human rights activism, the work that I do specifically focuses on the LGBTQ community. That's the paid work that I do. The other work that I do within the community is more along the lines of everything else that we're here to talk about today. So it's important to me because I am an out queer man. I'm also a Black man. I'm also a person who is married. I'm also a social worker. So all of those things kind of impact how and why I do the work that I do. So it's important to me because it is actually my life that's on the line when we talk about these kinds of things. Recognizing that when I am talking about the LGBTQ community, I am also talking about myself. And when I am talking about the intersections of identities within the LGBTQ community, I am talking about myself and the people that I care about and that I love. So it's important to me from a social work perspective, it's important to me from a human rights perspective, but it's also important to me because I am a person that is impacted by legislative inequity, interpersonal discrimination, all of those things. what is important for conference participants to know about this area of human rights? What is being demanded in the area of human rights? So I think it's really difficult to talk about LGBTQ issues kind of overarchingly, because we've seen a lot of movement over the past few years, and unfortunately, I'm here to say that it's not enough. Marriage was never the mountaintop. We still have Black trans women being murdered. I think at this point we're in March, the third month of the year, and like 8 or 9 Black trans women have been murdered across the country. So I am a person who took advantage of the fact that legally my marriage is recognized, but my sisters are being murdered on the street. Some of my friends are facing issues around housing inequity because we don't have statewide legislation that protects us. So a lot of times the question comes up, like, do you feel like people have changed, or like the attitude has shifted? Yes, in Cleveland, Ohio, and in other small sort of liberal city bubbles. But if you are from any other place than Cleveland, Ohio, or even if you travel an hour any direction within the state of Ohio, you are in a totally different socio-political landscape in which my life, the lives of people that I care about, the lives of my coworkers are at a greater risk than when I'm sitting up here in this wonderful liberal bubble. So the demand is that when we're talking about this, we're thinking about it from the lens of what else needs to happen. And what needs to happen is we need legislation that keeps people safe. We need folks in positions of power to yield and to step aside to the folks who are the most marginalized and the most impacted by that lack of legislation, legislative equality. So the next question is around how can conference participants express solidarity, and I think it's an interesting word, the idea of expressing solidarity, because sometimes solidarity means listening and yielding. There have been people who have been doing this work for decades, and does that mean I have 0 time left? Oh, 30 seconds, sure. So solidarity might mean listening and yielding and finding the folks who are doing the work that needs to be done. So I guess the last thing that I would say is, if you're thinking about LGBTQ equality or thinking about equality in general, or equity more importantly, it means starting with the people who are the most impacted and then going from there. If you look around the table and there's 0 people of color, or you're doing a panel on intersectionality and you don't have full representation within all of the different communities that we're supposed to be talking about, then we are not doing intersectional work. Intersectionality means looking around and saying, like, yes, that person represents a community and their voice has the same weight as somebody else. I think that's it.
Thanks, Ryan. Next, we have Bridget Christ, and I'll let Bridget introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Bridget Christ, and I am an LSW. Currently, I am a school-based therapist at Luis Munoz Marin School in Cleveland. Historically, I've worked with and advocated for women and families. I've been employed at a number of domestic violence centers across the country and assisted many sexual assault survivors. And I worked with homeless families for 5 years in Colorado. I took some time off to go to school and to be a mom, and now I'm back. I graduated last year from Cleveland State. In 2013, I had what I have to call an awakening. Whereas I never considered myself a racist and would have vehemently denied it if I was ever called one, I became aware of racism as an institution, and I became profoundly and undeniably aware of the privileges I was privy to being a cisgendered white female who is the mother of 2 boys. 2 boys who are able to inhabit this world overwhelmingly safe and carefree. This knowledge, both of the racist structure of our country and of my unavoidable place within it, as well as the internalized messages I have received, has forever changed me. Since 2013, my main area of focus has been racial justice. I do this work on a number of fronts: at my church, through the organization Showing Up for Racial Justice Northeast Ohio, and also at my School of Employment. I am a social worker on the micro and macro level, but my passion is in community organizing. This area of work is important to me first and foremost because The humane person in me knows at an emotional and spiritual level that every privilege I have comes at the expense of other people. Every single leg up that my children are given comes because another mother's children are born with a ball and chain around their leg. I cannot ignore this fact. This is new for me too, I'm nervous. The person in me that chose to become a social worker in order to make this world a quote unquote better place knows that the only way that this can happen is to break down the structures of white supremacy that our country was built upon and that still exists today. Until these structures are destroyed and new ones have taken their place, there will never be liberty and justice for all in our country. Unless structural racism and white supremacy are undone, we as social workers will never be able to truly assist our clients, people of color, LGBTQ, the poor and working class, non-Christians, etc., to thrive, not when they are denied their basic human rights on a daily basis. We are working against a system that was made to keep our clients oppressed. I have heard longtime anti-racism activists say again and again that it all comes down to racism. In the end, everything comes down to racism. My first reaction to this was, wow, that line of thinking is somewhat extreme. But over the years, I have come to realize that this statement is not extreme at all. Our country was built upon racist beliefs and systems and is still dominated by them today. When one system is overturned, another, usually much more insidious one, takes its place. Racism is the root of all evil in our country. It has dominated and destroyed every social justice movement in our country's history. It is the ultimate divide and conquer method, and has been utilized again and again, often without activists even being aware that they are implementing it while trying to undo it. I firmly believe that if we want to truly build intersectional resistance, we must first and foremost accept that racism is at the root of every system and movement in our country and truly educate ourselves about it and how it works. I believe that this is true on a macro level in organizing movements of resistance and organizing within communities, and it is also true for those of us that do direct service. In much of my schooling, and even now in the trainings I receive that are designed to assist me in being a better social worker and to better understand my clients and their families, the focus is on individuals and their families. If we were to use the ecological systems theory, we would realize that for the most part, we are only focusing on the micro and meso systems and their effects on the mental, emotional, and physical health of our clients. Often we completely ignore the impact that systemic racism has on the lives of people of color clients and our own service delivery. And I think that's really important, our own service delivery. Many social workers are not actively working to discover and uncover how their attitudes towards individuals and families can be fostered unknowingly by institutional forces or how systemic racism is affecting a client's life. The fact is that macro realities, barriers to accessibility, and intergenerational trauma, to name just a few, shape micro experiences and opportunities. To be truly effective, we must be working with our clients at the micro level while at the same time creating strategies and service delivery that work against systemic and interpersonal racism in ourselves, our organizations, and our communities. We must go beyond even that. At this time in the history of our country, we must get active at the macro level as well. For people of color, immigrants, Muslims, the LGBT community, this is a matter of life and death, and our involvement, no matter who we are, is imperative. In this line of work, I speak as a white person organizing other white people to get involved in anti-racist work. The first step is self-education, for knowledge truly is power, and these systems exist because we are supposed to be unaware of them at the structural level. We are fed the false belief that our country is a meritocracy and that anyone who works hard enough can make it. We have all been brainwashed into viewing our country and each other through the lens of racism without even realizing it. We must unlearn these belief systems so that we are able to be active in an accountable way. We must get involved in some way, shape, or form and get involved with a very clear anti-racist analysis. For anti-racism work is environmental work, LGBTQ work, immigrant rights work, women's rights work, etc. In all these forms of human and environmental rights violations, people of color, especially queer and trans people, experience the most dire consequences. White people must be an essential part of undoing white supremacy, for it is within our communities that structural racism is held and maintained. It is time for us to heed the call of Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, and Alicia Garcia, as well as other people of color anti-racist organizers to do this work within our own communities. We must be part of movements that are anti-racist at their core and that move white people to be part of a multiracial majority for justice and passion with accountability.
Thank you, Bridget. Up next, we have Kareem Henton.
I'm an activist here locally in Cleveland, and I am here, or rather I was asked to be here because of my activism with the group called Black Lives Matter here in Cleveland. And what I was asked to come here and do was to pretty much explain things from that perspective. And so one of the questions that was asked, and this is, I came here scripted, but I'm rather going to stray away from that. Ryan kind of inspired me to go, so if I go off on a tangent, you'll have to blame Ryan. So the question was, the beginning, what are the areas of human rights activism you're involved in, and why is it important to you? And this answer I'm going to keep as simple as possible. And it goes along with something that Ryan said, and that is, for starters, my life depends on it. My son's life depends on it. And my family members' lives depend on it. The other part that I'd like to use as an answer to that question is that it needs to be understood that the aspect, or rather the areas of human rights activism that are important to me and that compel me to do the work that I do is the same that pretty much is infecting so much of what's going on, or so much of what's wrong in this country right now, that that's just intertwined with everything. And it is, and I have to be the Debbie Downer, or the person that just mentions and brings attention to the elephant in the room, but it's white supremacy, patriarchy, period. I got to name it. So now, it's easy for me to necessarily prove or give an example of what I'm saying. You know, we can find the problems that stem from a group of people in the past that thought it was okay to treat another group of people not as people. And so with that understood, that is the start of basically a caste system or a hierarchy that pretty much is going to dictate how everything goes. And the concept is that we're familiar with, you know, you break it, you bought it. Well, you have to understand that they created this. So everything you see wrong with this, stop with the victim blaming and take ownership and get off your butt and help us fix it. So now, the next question that is asked, what is important for conference participants to know about this arena of human rights violations and what's being demanded? So Black Lives Matter, and I myself as an individual find myself compelled to battle this in various ways. Here in Cleveland or in Northeast Ohio, we find that we have a very beaten or defeated group of individuals that just don't believe that what they do is really going to make a difference. We see that evident in the polls when people vote. We see that evident when an atrocity happens and people really need to make their voices heard, and we don't see them out on those streets. Politicians aren't hearing from them. So because of this, where we find ourselves is we're trying to electrify people to come out to the streets, but more importantly If you're sitting on the couch, we want to motivate you to perhaps vote from the ballot box. Do your activism from the ballot box. When you go to your family functions, when you are at the job around the water cooler and you're hearing that latest racial joke or that latest joke that's against the LGBTQ community, say something. Say that it's not cool. That's how you're going to defeat it, because people are often influenced by their peers. That's where it starts. You can change that. You can start to change laws, and then we can start to see some change happening all around us. People are going to do what they feel that they can get away with. So if you want to express solidarity with organizations like Black Lives Matter, for example, you can, I can't be more honest with you, you can offer money. We need that money so we can continue to do the work that we do. I am a full-time employee, and I find it incredibly difficult to do what it is that I do. And when I read the comments sometimes, and I shouldn't read those comments on Facebook, but when I read those comments sometimes, one of the common things I always read, don't they have jobs? And what they seem to not realize is how when they make those comments, how they've bought into the system. And what I mean by that is this, is that they will shame you for your activism. They will automatically assume that you must not be working because that is the way for them to perhaps turn sentiments against you, because they're going to peg you as a leech off of society. But the other reason that they do this is that what unknowingly, that is what's pushed by, I would say, the powers that be. Because the powers that be want you working 60 hours a week, chasing after money so that you can attain those material things, so that you care more about yourself and less about your fellow man, and you have less time to deal with those issues that affect your brothers and sisters out there. So,
10 seconds.
Wow. So everybody, I really want you to perhaps give of your time. There are organizations out there that are dedicated to racial solidarity. I wanted to get into the convenience of intersectionality, and I'm sorry that I can't get into that, but I'll just say this real quick. There are a lot of folks that have backed up different organizations out there in the past, but as soon as their needs are met, they're off. But I'm still here. I'm still Black. Even though you advocated for those things that help the LGBTQ community, they're still Black after that. There's still some racial issues that need to be handled. And I can go deeper into that if we can discuss it later. Sorry, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we will have time. All right, up next, Deb Klein.
Worker justice issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in a minute. I've been a community organizer for 30 years, so issues really affect me and my work that I do. And I was thinking about this, and I will also tell you, I used to say I've been a community organizer for 26 years, for like the last 4 years, and finally realized I needed to update that amount of time. So I've been at this work for quite a while. Most of the issues that are talked about here and that we're going to talk about are also, our workers are affected. Worker justice cuts across every socioeconomic stratus, except of course the 1%, because they're the ones that are exploiting the workers. Low-income workers, immigrant workers, workers of color, women. If you think about it, it really seriously does affect everyone. And I'll bet you if it hasn't affected you personally, sitting here, somebody in your family at some point in time has been affected. I started my organizing career as a community organizer of low-income single moms who were not getting child support. Back in those times, it was back in the 90s, intersectionality was not a term that we used. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, boy, we really did practice that back then. Because if you think, again, about low-income single moms, I'm sure all the social workers, a lot of the issues that you work in every day affected a low-income single mom. Welfare, foster, hunger, homelessness, jobs. So back in that era, as I said, we didn't use the term intersectionality, but all of those issues were part of what we were organizing because they affected those that we were trying to organize. So why do I talk about that? Because we all of us need to think outside of our boxes. The issues that we care about the most, somebody else also is going to care about, and it's also going to affect somebody else in another category. So it's really important for people to get up, and I think somebody else has said it, and it may have been said a couple of times, to get up off their seats, get out from behind the computer screen, and get out on the streets, because that's where it actually really makes a difference. And I think about it, and you go back to every social justice change that has ever been made in this country, and it hasn't been made because those decision makers went, oh, you know what, I want to fix this issue, I want to fix this issue. It has come from us. It has come from one person who had an idea, who organized, found a lot of other people that thought the same as they did, and hit the streets and made a difference. You know, everybody's talking about the new guide that's out, okay, what's that guide? That everybody's been talking about. Been organizing for too long. There's a guide that was put together, and as soon as I start to describe it, I'm sure somebody will remember the name of it, that was put together by staff from Congress. And it's something. Indivisible, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. The Indivisible Guide. And it was put together by staff from Congress because they're trying to get us as progressives and liberals, or whatever side of the aisle you're on, to start organizing and make a difference, because that's what happened with the Tea Party. Sending an email to a congressperson, sending an email to a decision maker isn't going to cut it. You have to start making noise, and that is the only way that we're ever going to affect change, is by making noise, whether it's getting out on the streets, or it's making phone calls, or even faxing. Go ahead and fax, because at least when the fax goes, the machine is running, so they're paying attention to that. And I can tell you, I have been in congressional offices where, as I'm waiting to meet with a member, they have pages that sit in front of the computer screen, and those emails that you all send, delete, delete, delete. They don't even look at them. They just delete them. They're not counting them. They're not doing hashtags. So that's why I was so happy when the Indivisible Guide came out, and they started talking about us actually speaking up, using our voices, and using what we can to make a difference. All of you sitting in this room who are social workers are advocates because you're advocating for your clients. So you kind of already do that. But now it's time to organize and get out on the streets. We recently did, with Jobs with Justice, we were part of a small coalition, even though we are a coalition, we often join other coalitions, that organized a march on immigration and refugees. We organized, put that thing together in about a week's time, and had over 1,000 people on the street. So I think the time is now, because I'm also going to talk about the End Poverty Now march that we just did for the Republican convention. For like 9 months we organized that and had 1,000 people on the streets. So I think the time is now. I think people are angry, and it's something that we need to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Reverend Lorenzo Norris.
Good morning. And let me just say, I'm glad to see so many out for this session this morning. I'm here as a pastor and activist and representing Cleveland Clergy Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that engages in social and community activities. Many of the activist activity has been from Tamir Rice to Raise Up Cleveland, Infant Mortality, DOJ. But this morning, my emphasis is on another area of concern. How many here care for someone 60 plus? Maybe you're not 60 plus yet, but in 5 or 10 years you will be. And that puts you in a sandwich situation where you care for someone and you are 60 plus also. My son often tell us that baby boomers, you don't have to count yourself because we don't age. We just keep on working. But my emphasis is on ensuring that growing older population in this county will have all of the necessary opportunities for enhanced quality of life in their latter years and remain in their home, those that can independently with respect and dignity. In this county, believe it or not, approximately between 282,000 and 513,000, according to the 2010 census report, 60 plus residents lives in this county. But when we look at 2030, that will increase. Seniors, older adults, 21% of the population. By 2030, will be 31% of the population in this county, outnumbering youth under the age of 20. But let me say why this is important. Older growing population currently do not have the information or skills to assess many of the various programs for older citizens in this community. They need help. Older adults like transportation, one of the problems, to get to grocery stores, to shopping, take care of business, food pantry, etc. Secondly, older adults are often abused, neglected, and financially exploited. OCAP, Ohio Coalition Adult Protected Services, said 105,000 in the state of Ohio are abused, neglected, financially exploited yearly. Recently in this county, DSAS, the Division of Senior and Adult Services, received 2,764 client service calls about older adults being abused, neglected, or financially exploited. Also, food is a problem. Would you believe that in this county and this state that there are 60 plus people that are going hungry? This cross class, gender, race, etc. But they are going hungry. Many do not have nutrition meals, healthy meals. Thirdly, if one decides to stay in their home, home repair, maintenance are tough for them financially. Contractors are exploiting our older adults. If they get something, a roof on, steps fixed, they have to decide between groceries, medical bills, rather than maintaining their homes. The cost of prescription drugs, choosing between paying the rent, bills, or purchasing expensive medication. One of the problems I think we should get involved in is county, when we look at in counties out of the 88, we find that in Franklin County, per capita, $200 per senior in their budget. For Hamilton, 140. But in this county, believe it or not, which is larger than Hamilton or Franklin, we only spend less than 100 per capita.
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I guess what I'm saying is we look at this thing. We need to talk about policies that will increase services, also that a county budget that would be allocated to increase as the older population increase in age. And finally, remember The older population is not just a number, but is the foundation which our community is built on. We stand on the shoulder of those who went before us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And our last but not least, our final panelist is Maya Simek.
I am excited to be here as both an alumni of Case Western Reserve's Mandel School and also Cleveland State University's Law School. And I love that I get to be a part of a conference that embraces both schools. So I'm very excited to be here today. I'm coming to you as also the Director of Programming at the LGBT Center, like my colleague Ryan. And I'm also a privileged faculty member at Cleveland State, both the Law School and the Social Work School. So that's a little bit about what I'm coming from, where I'm coming from, and what I'm coming to you with. I had a sense of what I was going to say initially, and then my co-panelists just did so wonderfully that it just had to scrap everything I was going to say. And so what I want to talk about very briefly in the time that we have left is what it looks like in terms of being a social worker and having that person come in, look at you in front of you, and why it matters. So I'm at the LGBT Center, and we're a community center. So what that means is people just drop in, and they come to us with a whole gamut of needs. And when they come, it's our job to figure out where it is that we can find the services that they're most in need of. And so I wanted to tell you a story about someone who came in about 2 weeks ago. The young person was about 20 years old, and he came in and said, "I'm at my wit's end, and I don't know where I'm gonna go." He was African American. He was diagnosed with HIV, and he had been diagnosed for about 5 years, but had never received any treatment. So when he was looking at me, he said, "My health's not doing well. I was infected from the first person that I ever had intimate relationships with, and because of who I identify as, I don't have a biological family to support me. And they kicked me out when I was young, and I've been couch surfing ever since. But this person is the person who is supposed to take care of me and love me, and has ultimately also resulted in me being infected with HIV, and I have nowhere else to go. What do I do?" And so when I think of social workers, I always think of intake forms. Who knows you got some intake form experience in here, right? Okay, yeah, I thought so. So when you're looking at an intake form, there are all of these different lines that you're supposed to fill out that identify who this person is sitting across from you, right? Neat little boxes, what it looks like. Let's check it all off. Except it's not that simple, right? You know what you don't know when you're across from someone and your stomach drops and you have to acknowledge, I don't know that resource. I don't know what that's gonna look like, and I don't know how to tell you necessarily it's gonna get better, but we're gonna figure it out. To me, this is what activism looks like for the people in this room and for myself. Being able to know what resources would be appropriate to direct someone to when we don't necessarily know all of those other areas, because we're all experts, right? Like, we know a bunch of stuff, right? Come on. All right, we know a bunch of stuff. We sit with that. But we also know what we don't know. We have to know what we don't know in order to be of the most service to the people that we're working with. So when that person came in, it was, where are we gonna get housing? Where are we gonna get medical? Where are we gonna get counseling? Where are we gonna get access to food? How am I gonna tie this all in so it's not duplicative, right? Knowing how to address all of those aspects on a form, I think, is some of the most important ways that we can identify and address with people that we're interacting with, because it allows you to know how you walk into the room, what we're carrying with us. As a Maya, when I walk into a room, what does that look like for me? How do people see me? What do I bring to the table so my use of self can be important? And also, how do I know what I don't know about you? And what can I do to get there so that I can use everything I have, my privilege, myself, my service, to help be where you need to be? And of the amazing community that we're developing and all of the things that we are doing together as social workers in this room, what are we doing to build community with other disciplines or other areas that will also be able to bring more power to our movement? How many other lawyers or dentists or bankers do we know that we can draw in to be interdisciplinary, to share our knowledge across disciplines? How can we do that in a way that matters? What can we do to have that conversation? How can our communities expand? Because this room is awesome. I look around and I feel really empowered and wonderful to be part of it and honored, but I know what's not here. We're here. How can we make sure that we are also there and building a collaborative effort? So at the end of the day, I think activism looks very different for all of us. And I think there's no wrong way to be an activist. I think that if you have the ability to give money, absolutely give money. And if you have the ability to be on the streets, be on the streets. And I think at the end of the day, if you're able to do something that allows you to volunteer in a population that you know you don't know enough about, but it will help you to be a better advocate across the board, do so. Give of your time and learn all that you can so that we can be connected and unified together in a way that continues to challenge where we are so that we can move forward. Thank you.